You're listening to the Hello World podcast, number 18. My name is Sean Wildermuth, and I'm your host. The Hello World podcast is where you can hear from some of your favorite developers, authors, and speakers about how they got started in this business. We go way back to their first computer, their first code experience, and their first job. Today my guest is Lynn Langit. She's the founder of Lynn Langit Consulting. She has also been designing and helping teams to implement big data solutions. These solutions have included SQL Server 2012, Hadoop, MongoDB, AWS, Windows Azure, and Google Cloud Technologies. In 2003, she was awarded the MVP for SQL Server for Microsoft. In 2012, 2013, and again 2014, she was recognized by Google for her community education work around their commercial cloud and received the Google Developer Expert Award for the Google Cloud. She's the author of 3 books on SQL Server Business Intelligence, OLAP, and the most recent of which is Smart Business Intelligence with SQL Server 2008 from MS Press. Lynn is also the author of many articles on big data technologies. In today's episode, I got to talk with Lynn at length about how she got started in this business, and it's an interesting mix of managing sales teams, managing development teams, creating new products, as well as being a bit of a computer geek. I think you'll enjoy it. Let's take a listen. I'm really happy to have Lynn Langit on the show today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks.
I got you up quite early to be on the show, is that right?
You did. I'm out here on the West Coast, and it's 8 a.m., which is not normally developer productivity hour, if you know what I mean.
That's true. You must have a meeting with a client.
I do, actually. I have this year, I'm working with a lot of clients all over the world, and sometimes I'll get up as early as 5 or 6 in the morning for some of my clients.
Oh, wow. That's not, I hope you're really well paid. At those at the 5 or 6 a.m. I actually had client meetings at that time, and then I've gone to sleep. But it's much harder to do the reverse.
Yeah.
So, how early did you start playing with computers? Was this a childhood thing?
No, I came to professional technical work really sort of in the middle of my life. I'm not a young person, and I had a whole nother professional career and came to it in the middle of my life.
What did you do before it?
Well, really, I had 2 things. My sort of dream and goal was to be a college professor, which was a little bit unusual because I am from the Midwest. I'm from a farm town. I'm not a farmer, but my parents were. And I was the first person in my family to go to college at all.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I was a very good student. And I actually started college when I was 15 because I was wanting to study some subjects that weren't offered in my small high school.
Wow. And where did you grow up?
I'm from West Fargo, North Dakota. Yeah, sure, you betcha.
That's to disarm me from any of those jokes. I understand. So a Midwestern girl. Yep. And so did you go, was the college there in Fargo?
I went to Morehead State University, which is now University of Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
I also, and this kind of parlays into my first career choice, my grandmother spoke German. She was from Austria, and she taught me to speak German. No. And that is actually why I started going to college when I was 15, because I wanted to be very fluent in German. And there was only 2 years offered in my high school. And so I rode my bike to Morehead and took a university class when I was 15 years old.
Wow.
And I was intimidated like crazy because my teacher was a German woman. And one of the things I did when I was 16 is I took my first plane trip. I had never been on an airplane. And the first time I took a plane trip was to Germany.
That's a big first trip.
Yeah, it was. And it was a little mini trip, about 2.5, 3 weeks. And it was a combination visit the country and spend some time with a family. So like a mini exchange student program.
Nice.
And I specifically requested a family that spoke no English. So talk about a mind-blowing thing.
Wow. And in hindsight, was that wise?
Well, it changed my life.
Oh,
it really did. Because, I came from really sort of, conservative and I call it the monoculture, where it was really sort of middle America and good, don't get me wrong, really good place to grow up. But, there's just not a lot of variety, right? And so when I went to Germany and realized, wow, there is a whole nother world out there, not just in the books I read, I came back and I said, I want to learn this. I want to be an expert. And so that's how I got going to college when I was 15. And it was funny because I was in college when I did the trip. And I came back and I realized, well, these are, Americans trying to speak German. So I went from not speaking in the university class to being, the top student.
The fear was gone.
Yeah.
Wow. And did you want to be a German professor?
I wasn't sure exactly what, because again, in my family, like my dad was a farmer and he only went to school until he was 14. So, just didn't have the opportunity for education. And really his life, although he had a pretty good life considering that, because he was a hardworking person and an intelligent person, he didn't have the opportunity for education. And I really personally saw what kind of life you would have, or you would have the potential to have without being educated. My mom did graduate from high school, but I didn't have the experience of really even having people around me growing up that had, gone to the university. So I didn't really even understand what was possible. I just knew I wanted to learn more German.
That's a good approach. My family's actually from the Midwest, from northwestern Illinois, and I always lived in big cities growing up, but we would go back to see the family, and it was amazing to see the difference in my mindset. I was the first of the family to not have been born in one of these 2 or 3 little towns in northwestern Illinois. Even my brothers and sisters were born there. And so it was something that was so just foreign to me. We had farmers and factory workers and that sort of thing in most of my family, and their idea of living in a town where you had to have a car was pretty foreign, even as young as I am.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's just so different than the world I live in now.
Absolutely,
just completely different.
And most days it feels like I'm very lucky, and some days I think maybe they had it right.
Yeah, well, this is actually a weird analogy, but later in my adult life, I started doing technical volunteering. I'm jumping around here, but
sure.
one of the places that I did technical volunteering in is sub-Saharan Africa. So I went to Zambia 5 times for a month each summer. And although Zambia has made actually quite a lot of progress in the time, it's been 10 years now, but 10 years ago, this sounds really weird, but there were parts of Zambia that reminded me of how it was when I grew up. It was like going back because it was sort of agriculturally based, rural, farm culture, very friendly people. It was just, again, it just kind of reminds me of, that it's one world.
It really is.
Yeah. So
it really is. So how did you graduated college and at that point you started, that whole process of tenure and all that, or did something else divert it?
Again, I'm just, everything in my life is sort of unusual. I don't know why, but it's just, I never did anything started college when I was 15. So because I started college so young and I had no guidance, and I paid for it myself because I was very much a working class family. So I started working, at summer jobs and stuff when I was 12, 13 years old. I mean, it's farm state. They don't really, it wasn't, the age limits weren't enforced, right?
Right.
And so it was very much, okay, you want to do something, you're going to pay for it yourself. So I approached education from a very sort of unique way in that, I was personally paying for it. And so one of the things that I saw at university was that, professors had certain preferences and they seemed to prefer the non-101 class. They seemed to prefer the higher level class. So in my being basically naive, I said, well, I want to take what the people want to teach. And so it's actually, again, very unusual because, generally if you're going to skip a first level requirement, you have to go talk to the professor. But I just thought that was inefficient. So literally what I did is I stole a pack of admit slips and I admitted myself to all the higher level classes, figuring that I was the consumer. And this was just, I was a really good student. I've always been a straight A student. And so I got this really unique education. So rather than taking, History 101, I took History 400. And I took classes when I was, 16 and 17 years old with graduate students because I wanted to.
Yeah.
And so I had a very unique education. I did major in German, but I just took the classes I wanted rather than a major or a minor, figuring I just, I'm the consumer of education and I want to get the highest quality education. My original thought was I'd be some kind of writer because I've always enjoyed writing. I've always written journals. I was, got awards in high school for writing. So I just thought, well, I'm going to be some sort of writer or writing teacher and I'll have something to do with languages. But as far as career, I had no idea. I thought I'll just keep going to college.
As long as they let me in, as long as I can afford it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So what happened? I mean, you were not a German college professor at this point. Is that correct?
So, yeah. So what happened is I didn't really have the resources from my family to keep on going, and I needed to work. And the other thing is I graduated so young. I graduated from college when I was 19. And I knew because I had been to Germany a couple times because I started going every year that I wanted to live somewhere other than North Dakota. That had been a good place to grow up, but, it's time for me to go on.
Yeah.
So again, the resources were, really constrained. My parents didn't really, have resources to support me, and I had to support myself. So I just picked the place where I knew someone that seemed to have a good university, and that was actually in Oklahoma. One of my former teachers, because I always got along well with my teachers, moved to Oklahoma, and OU had a linguistics program. So I applied for a full scholarship because I really just didn't have the money.
Sure.
And didn't get it is really what happened. Not because of grades. It was more from me being politically naive. I just didn't understand the systems. I didn't understand. I was naive. I was like, well, I have straight A's. I should just get this.
Yeah.
And I didn't. So I was working at the time. I was working in a retail environment. And, I'm always an overachiever. So even though I was planning to go to grad school, every job that I've had, I'm serious. The first job that I had, I worked at a gun club in North Dakota, and they made me a supervisor after 6 months of it. And I was 14 years old and trying to supervise the 20-year-olds, which was a complete joke, of course.
Of course.
But every job I've had, after about 6 months or a year, they want to make me the manager. I guess I'm just bossy.
No comment.
Right. So I was working at a big retail chain in Oklahoma, thinking that's going to, supplement my school. And, I was actually honestly shocked when I didn't get the scholarship because I was a straight A student. But again, I was missing some of the prerequisites because I took 400 level classes rather than 100.
Right.
And I mean, in hindsight, that's just goofy, but that's the way things work. Right. So then, I just started working, and then I realized that I probably wanted to get to one of the coasts because I just wanted to. And so then I ended up transferring with that company out to the West Coast. And I was very kind of got into an ambitious cycle. And I said, well, if I'm not going to go to school, because frankly, I was a little bit disgruntled by the whole outcome of that.
Sure.
Then I'm going to become the president of a company by the time I'm, 25 years old. Very ambitious, right?
Yes.
So came out to the West Coast, and the company was a Midwest company. It was Target. And so there was a high value on Midwest people because they had some struggles when they came to the West Coast because they had some labor disputes and stuff like that. So they didn't understand the market. And so, again, I progressed very rapidly. I was like 22, 23 years old, making like $100,000 a year, driving a red sports car, living the life in California. You know what I mean? So I kind of forgot about my educational pursuits at that time, because I just, come on, I was from North Dakota. That was a lot of fun.
and my guess is that at Target, your German skills weren't utilized, to their full potential.
No. But what was utilized was my energy and my curiosity. I always, people say, oh, gosh, you've been very successful. You must be like really smart or something. And actually, I'm really not. I'm really tenacious and I'm really curious and I'm a hard worker too. So, you combine those three things and then kind of some luck in life. I've had, good health and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And you can go pretty far. You can go pretty far. If you're just curious and you're willing to put your mind to it. So from a work standpoint, I did move up. I was like, in line to not run a company, but to, like run a store, which was pretty significant. The stores are pretty big.
Sure.
When I was like 23, 24 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I had a huge responsibility on one of the biggest stores in Southern California. And, I was doing really well for that environment. But what was starting to dawn on me is perhaps that environment wasn't one that I wanted to work in for the rest of my life.
Sure.
And no dig on retail people because, it's an honest living. But again, I have this academic bent and it was unfulfilled. Now, how I addressed that is I had never lived in a big city. And so, I spent every weekend going to all these events and art museums. And, I was like a kid in a candy store because, the museum, there was maybe one in North Dakota, would change the exhibit 2 times a year, right? Yeah. It wasn't like LA. So I was really enjoying my environment, plus I was going to Germany every year and, I cannot complain being, 20 some years old and making good money and going all over the world. That was not a bad life.
But your curiosity, even with everything going on, probably was starting to feel a little unfulfilled.
Yeah, it really was. And so then I was in the job switch every couple of years because that's what you do when you're super ambitious. So I had recruiters working for me and, I was really doing well, buying like $300 suits and, the whole 80s thing. This is really dating me, but, just being the yuppie, being that nasty young yuppie boss, right? That caricature that was in all the movies. That was me.
Please tell me that you also had the feathered hair.
I did.
Oh, good. Makes him feel better.
I did. I had the Farrah hair. It was crazy. but anyway, so I eventually landed from moving around in a job that had to do with software. And I bet you know this. You know the store software, et cetera?
I do. In every mall in America.
Exactly. So in the pre-Best Buy days, they actually hired me because of my expertise as, in retail in general. And at the time I was hired, I was hired as a district manager and I had 18 stores and there were 0 female employees in any of the 18 stores.
Wow.
Yeah, that was an interesting situation because they hired me because I was a retail expert. The stores are in malls, men and women shop in malls. And, to help, get the stores reflective of more the reality of the shoppers. So you can imagine the reception that I got when I joined at that level. I was universally despised. So it was, and I actually I was pretty, savvy about it. I actually acknowledged it, which I wouldn't recommend this ever, but I had a sales contest, and the winners got to throw cream pies at me.
Wow.
And, I underestimated because I had previously I had gone an interim to clothing, so it was all women. And so when I did stuff like that, the women were very nice and gentle. And I don't mean to be stereotypical here, but I'm just telling you the reality. But when I switched over and it was all guys, oh my God, they could have shot those cream pies out of cannons. They almost knocked me over.
Wow.
But it did kind of work. It diffused tension, right?
Yeah.
So that was actually my entry into technology because being me and being curious, the guys that did want to work with me that didn't just say, well, this is ridiculous. I said, all right, I know something you need and you know something I need. It's very practical. I know how to successfully run a retail store and you know something about software. That's why you're here. So I'm going to teach you and you teach me. And that is when I started. So I really became sort of an expert user. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's how I started. And I, again, I've never shied away from learning, as I started in my initial story. So I went to, vendor software events with my store people. And I would tell them, I would say, now you have to explain it to me because you're going to have to explain it to a customer. And I know this irritates you, but not all of your customers are going to be technical. You're in a public environment. And so, that was my entry in, basically.
Wow. Yeah, I've purchased quite a lot of, bad software from Software, etc. As a kid, when I would be brought to the mall when the whole family would go, there were 2 stores in the mall that I wanted to go to, and neither of them had closed. Big surprise to anyone who has seen me in person. And of course, Radio Shack is the other one. But and so you learned all this different software in order to make sure that your guys could sell it. Is that kind of the expert user part of that?
Yeah, and then I started taking classes because, again, overachiever and focus on education. So I started taking classes at New Horizons, and the first class I took was DOS. And I had no idea. I didn't understand it at all. And I went home and studied, and I got Xtree Pro Gold so that I could understand. Remember this? This is really deep. And I'm curious, right? I wanted to know how things worked. And I liked the class. And so I could take free classes. So I just kept on taking classes. And again, never really got beyond expert user. So then I had an interlude where I went to another retailer because I went pretty high at Software, et cetera. I went all the way up to vice president. But then the market changed and Best Buy came and everything. And the leadership of the company didn't respond, in my opinion, appropriately because, they didn't because they almost went out of business. So then I decided I needed to go somewhere else. So I went and actually worked with the founders of a toy company, Zany Brainy. Which was a lot of fun because, among other things, I was considered by that time to be a software expert. And so it was a startup, and I worked with the buyers and really delivered the whole kids software program in the stores. And that was, the beginning of things that I'm, doing today. So just sort of deepened my expertise, learned how to work with vendors. That was when it was box software. So I learned how to learn from the vendors about the software, which again served me very well when I, for example, went to work at Microsoft and sort of worked in that role, albeit at a technical level, but that's where I started. So I did that. And then I went to one more vendor, one more retailer. And then I sort of the biological clock kicked in and I said, hey, if I'm going to have a child, I need to do it before I get too old. So then I got pregnant and I had a real difficulty. In the end, I had some pretty bad medical complications. Everything turned out okay, but I was on bed rest for I think 8 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, anybody who knows me, you basically almost have to strap me down because I'm just not that kind of a person, right?
Yeah.
So
unbounding energy, and you're told to rest.
Yeah, pretty much. So during this time, I wanted to learn something. So I decided that I would learn how to program. So at that time, I didn't even really know what programming was, but the web was starting, and I just continued sort of being that power user person that the developers out there probably like, the person who, will test your stuff and give you sort of intelligent feedback. So whatever company I worked at, I was always testing the software. I would test the email systems or whatever. I just liked it, right?
We always like that user that will test it in ways we never thought of testing it, so we have to fix bugs. We really like that.
Yeah, and that was right, haha. And I loved it. So when I was down, and literally, it was life-threatening thing. So
wow.
It was pretty, one of those humbling parts of your life, right? So I couldn't get up, even I was supposed to eat laying down. It was pretty life-threatening.
Yeah.
So instead of watching, Oprah all day, I got HTML, that Elizabeth, what's her name? The Peach Pit book for HTML.
Oh yeah.
And I said, I think I get this. And so I literally read the book on my side, on the floor, and, had my computer on, the keyboard on my side. And I made my first webpage. And I said, oh, this is really, really fun. And so I had gotten a job at New Horizons when I got pregnant because I had some other difficulty. And I said, I need to have a more constrained work environment.
Sure.
retail person and work 100 hours. So I started and I was training like just basic stuff, like Windows and, Word and that kind of stuff, because it was a priority in my life to, have a successful pregnancy, and work kind of turned down a little bit there.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, if I'm going to make any money at this, because that wasn't exactly the most high paying job in the world, I need to, get into programming. So I'm going to teach myself. So I did.
Wow.
Yeah. So I started with ASP and HTML and had my child. And then I, went into the professional level, which at that time, this was the .com boom, was the MCSE stuff,
yep.
The certification. And so there was, first I did the NT, and that's actually kind of interesting. So I was very nervous because I was like, okay, I'm doing a career change. I have a new child. I'm going to study as hard as I can study. So I went and took my first professional certification exam, and I got 100%.
Nice.
And I was so happy. And the test administrator was a woman. And she said, I want to put this on the wall. There's never a woman here. And you got 100%. It was just really nice.
That is nice.
Yeah. So I went through the whole NT cert in and honestly, now in hindsight, it was pretty easy, probably too easy. But for someone like me, it was okay. I went through the whole thing in like 4 weeks.
Nice.
And then Windows 2000 came. And they were desperate for teachers because at that time, anybody who knew anything went. And so in Californians.com, they left. And so New Horizons was having a hard time keeping teachers. And so they put bonuses for passing tests. And of course, that was music to my ears because I was needing money. I was like, I can pass tests. So I got fast tracked to the Windows 2000 teaching track because of my exam passing success. And, I know it's, not maybe the best thing in the world, but for some people who are new to technology, the whole sort of exam metaphor does help them, career changers and that kind of stuff.
And validates, some level of competency, even if, it's not going to guarantee your success, but it is going to guarantee you understand the concepts and those sorts of things.
Right. And I always, took pride in the fact that, yes, you had to pass the test, but the ultimate goal, of course, was to understand the technology so that you could, work in it. Right. And so my teaching approach was make a grid of the skills and go and do them.
Right.
So if you have to set up DNS, then, install Windows 2000, install DNS, and actually do the task. Don't just read a book. That's not the point, right?
Absolutely.
And so my students had a pretty good success rate. So anyway, they were bonusing for the Windows 2000 tests. And again, I just blazed through them. And I literally passed like 20 tests in a year, maybe 25 tests in a year.
Wow.
Yeah. And I just I decided, I was like, okay, this is it. I've changed careers and now I'm going to be successful in this career, and never mind the fact I have a, 1-year-old, I'm going to do it. I have to tell you, I have the best mom in the world. My mom lives nearby and she truly makes my life possible. She's fantastic.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. I have
that's
to
always good. So your mom moved out from the Midwest to be near you?
Yeah, I had again, sort of the impetus to get into this is I had sort of 3 things happen to me. 2 of them were, bad, and one was just, it turned out ultimately good, but all within a month. I lost a retail job. And then, actually the sequence was my dad passed away at 59, one month into retirement.
Wow.
And then I lost my retail job, and then I found myself pregnant all within like a month. And so I said, all right, it's time to do something different. And that's when I, said, okay, I like computers and I'm going to go for this thing at New Horizons. So. Wow.
And how did you transition into Microsoft from New Horizons? Was that a direct thing?
So kind of. So I stayed at New Horizons really long. And at the end, I was, I started consulting like everybody does because the students would ask you, right? Mm-hmm. And again, my approach into consulting was really weird because I new mom and very busy and so I just literally said, okay, what pays the most? Okay, programming. All right, I'm going to do that. People like, why do you program? Well, because I had a 2-year-old at that time, and I needed something constrained, and so I started with hourly, And then I wanted to find some other people to work with. And so I wanted to escalate my programming learning because I, was trying to, get up to speed quick. So
Yeah.
I saw that there was this conference coming to LA. You'll know this, the PDC.
Yes.
And so I said to them at New Horizons, I said, can I go to PDC? And they said, okay. So I went, and it was just the same thing as when I went to college. It was all over again because I had been studying programming for 6 months, and I went to the PDC, you're the only woman again. And everybody there is a C++ programmer, and they're hardcore. And I just was so intimidated. But I was curious.
It's a great place to be curious.
And this is kind of a cool story because of what happened this year. I saw this one woman there. I saw this one woman in the audience, and she had the coolest computer ever. She had a tablet, and she was writing furiously on her tablet. And I thought, if she can do it, I can do it. And I was too intimidated to talk to her. Do you know who that woman is?
I do not.
Julie Lehrman.
Oh, really? Wow.
And last year, I actually went out to Vermont after I did some stuff in Boston and stayed at her house at her invitation. And Llewellyn and I taught kids in the Vermont schools. That's what we're doing out there. And it was so neat to be able to tell her, this is an amazing thing in my life that here I saw you and you were like my idol, and here I am in your house, and we're basically professional colleagues now.
That's amazing. Her show, actually, she was just on the show. Her show went out today. Mm-hmm. And so she's always great to talk to.
She's fantastic.
And she has that, she doesn't know how inspiring she is, I think is kind of amazing.
Well, she's one of the people that's personally responsible for my success without even knowing it, just by being there.
Wow.
Just there. So I went to PDC. The other thing I remember is Donald Farmer did a presentation on SSIS, which I didn't fully understand, mm-hmm. but I did fully understand that everybody in the room gave him a standing ovation. And I said, these people are not, they don't tend to applaud, much less stand up. There must be something really good here. And so that actually caused me to go back to New Horizons and say, what is this thing, SQL Server? Can I learn this?
And that's how you got, passionate about that.
Yeah, because I was finishing Windows 2000 cert, and I needed a elective. And my boss said, well, okay. So I took the class and amazingly passed the test, but it was the admin. So, it was relatively difficult because it was new to me, but in the world of SQL Server, that was the easier sort of test.
Sure. At least that's a good place to start.
Mm-hmm. And then I loved it. There's something about SQL Server that just grabbed me, and I just was fascinated by the whole thing. And I guess maybe because I was an Excel junkie when I was a business person.
Sure.
Like a super, I never did any relational database, never did Access, anything. But I just said, I want to learn everything about this. And I did. And so at New Horizons, I started, I basically expanded their program and taught all 10 classes that were offered through certification and learned everything about SQL Server. Every aspect of the product, because I just taught it over and over and over and over and just switched into teaching that. And that's my consultancy move there. So the question you originally asked, how did I get to Microsoft? So I was moving my consultancy from programming to database, which I guess isn't that relevant, but I wanted to get more people to work with me. And so I went to the show, and I realized that all these people were at shows. And so the next year there was a tech ed in San Diego, and they said that if you were an MCT, which I was, you could get a free pass if you worked the show. So I went and I worked the hands-on labs. And again, being me, I had tried BizTalk once, and there was this big disaster with BizTalk. Nobody knew it. Nobody knew anything. The lab didn't work right. And I said, okay, I'll try it. So I've always been the one to dip in the pool, right?
Yeah.
So I also met all these fantastic trainers from all over the world, and they wanted to, wanted to contract or work together to expand my business. So I just started, really, really being known because I got known from that show. And the next year I got hired as a contract because I was working both at New Horizons and contract. to actually run the hands-on labs in conjunction with the contractor firm that was doing the virtual machine implementations. I was sort of the front of the house, and so I was the person who worked with all the product teams at Microsoft. So I went from, person who was scared to talk at PDC to 2 years later doing the presentations in Redmond to the product groups about what they needed to do to turn their labs in on time so that we could, have a high quality event. So I did that for, a couple years. And then there was an opening for an evangelist on the team. And I was just very well known to so many people in DPE and Microsoft. They approached me. And at that time, my consultancy was going really pretty good. And I was actually going to partner up with some people who are now at Microsoft, like Matthew Roach was one of the people.
Oh, wow.
He works on the SQL Server team. So me and a couple of other people were talking about, making this powerhouse consulting firm. And then Microsoft came to me and said, we really want you in DPE. And I said, I'm not really a developer. I'm more of a SQL person. And they said, no, you don't understand. We really, really want you. And, I'm a pretty good negotiator. And so after about 5 times of that, I was like, oh, you want me that much? Okay. So it was actually really good for me because I had kind of, although I taught myself basic programming and I taught, the C# class, that kind of stuff, professionally, my consultancy moved into SharePoint and BI and SQL query tuning. And I would hire out the programming part because, you're a developer. If you don't do it, really frequently, it's not, it's a skill, right?
Absolutely.
And so I could, I'm still really good at QA and breaking people's code because of my nature, but I'm not a super fast coder.
Sure.
I'm just not, so I'm practical. So I'd hire people. So anyway, so I got hired to be a developer evangelist. So my first, and it was funny because again, I just negotiated everything because 2 weeks before I got the offer, I signed the contract to write my first book, which I really, really wanted to do on SQL BI. And I said, guys, I have to finish my book, and all. So I have all these contracts. So I had a delayed start. And again, I worked like an insane person. I wrote my first technical book while doing other contracts and raising my daughter, who was now 5, in 3 months.
That is crazy. A book in 3 months.
Your first book in 3 months.
That
Super
is
cool, right?
that true. I'll go out on a limb here. That is truly insane.
Yeah, there are a lot of weird stuff. Sleep optional a lot of my life. So they were launching Vista, and sort of a good thing I didn't know any better, right?
Yes.
So I said, okay, negotiate. So my first day, I went to sign the papers in Irvine, California, and then I went to the internal conference, Tech Ready, for a week. And then my first official day at work, I had no orientation, nothing. I said, I'll skip it. I did the keynote presentation for the Vista launch in Los Angeles.
Wow.
And I was so nervous. I actually lost weight. I'm not kidding you, because I was kind of I was trying to lose weight at that time. And so I was weighing myself a lot. I was like, why are my pants too big? I was so nervous. I lost weight because I had product team members there, everything. And I thought, okay, this is, again, the history of Lynn. I'm either going to do really well or I'm going to get fired really fast. So apparently I did okay.
Wow. And in DPE, was it a group with many women there? Because my impression of DPE is that it's been changing lately, but it seemed to be pretty male dominated because of, kind of this idea that, men wanted to listen to men.
Yep. When I was there, there was one woman on the East Coast, Osley Bilgan, and me. So of about 50.
Wow.
Yep. Well, at least I didn't ask people to throw pies in my face after that story.
Good call.
So what was really good for me professionally is, as you can tell, I'm kind of ADD and very curious. So working in DPE, you're presenting 3 to 5 times per week.
Right.
And I had sort of got my presenter chops being a trainer, but it's a big transition to go from classroom trainer to the product presenter because it's different, right?
5 days to 1 hour, and you're introducing interest, not teaching.
Right. And the other thing was, I didn't want to be on an airplane all the time. And so how you get paid in bonus there is based on reach. And so I really had no idea about online. I didn't even have a blog, nothing. Right. And so, but I'm a quick study. So what I did is I just started studying on who had the top blog, who had the top, whatever. Oh, this is actually funny. So I had some friends from Channel 9 because I had done mix in some of the shows as a vendor. And so I thought, well, probably good to get a show on Channel 9. And you might know because you were on my show that I had this show called Geek Speak. And my concept was to bring on influencers, but not employees. So you could get the real scoop on what the products were because the influencers could be more honest, right? And I thought this is a show I'd want to listen to. So when I started, they had this woman in tech thing, a meeting or whatever, and they flew all of us together. And Osley and I were the only technical women at this woman in tech. And no denigration to women in marketing because, marketing is important, right? But I was like, well, really? We're the only two? But anyway, we were. And the vice president who was there said, well, you need to increase your online visibility. And you should be, up here on some of the online properties. And I said, so it'd be kind of good if one of us had a regular show on Channel 9, like every week. He said, oh, well, that's really fantastic. And I said, great, tune into my show next week. And I'm really, really proud of the fact that my show at some points in the history of Channel 9 was, I think it was number 4 for all the shows, all the content in terms of downloads and everything.
Nice.
Yeah, and this goes back to the Julie Lehrman thing. I have this big focus about getting more women in tech by being a technical woman. And I think there's no substitute to inspire other women other than to be a visible technical woman.
Absolutely.
And, it's just something you don't talk about it plainly enough. I have 100 meetings about what to do. And I went to all of them and nothing happens. And it's very frustrating. And finally, I don't even go to the meetings. I try to be very visible. And that tied in with the evangelism, because it was, that was a job sort of requirement. So that's sort of how I learned you are going to present something in person, but then also they always talk to us about multimodal, how to put it on different online properties and different vehicles, which has been a really important career learning as a technical person. You know what I mean?
Yeah. This whole idea that, people want to be able to, not only get the technical content, but kind of see the person behind it. And it's this, what's the word I used to use for it? It is a sort of remote mentoring, right? You're mentoring without it necessarily being a dialogue.
I call it micro mentoring because it's literally you see the person, you go, I could do that. I mean, one of the reasons I joined Microsoft is I saw a woman evangelist on Channel 9. And I watched her Channel 9 interview of a developer in Barcelona, Tech Ed Barcelona. And I said, I can do that. I can do that. That looks like me.
Yeah.
I can do that. So I came on board and it really upped my technical chops because, I had to present in, I used to say hello world in 17 different languages,
Right.
But it was perfect for my personality, right? I'm like, oh, F#, what's that? Okay, let me read a book, right?
Yeah.
And again, I used my uniqueness as an advantage. So, you see this common thread through the history of my life is I kind of get lucky and I sort of do it my way. And it resulted in some really good success. I mean, I had some of the top reach of all of DPE because I just did things uniquely. And I did weird things. Like I used the budget to buy books when books were still a thing. And I used to be like Oprah. And I would just in the beginning of my events, my MSTN events, I would just go in the audience and hand out technical books, which are like candy for developers, right? And so people would be like, oh, you got to go. Oh, she has the best stuff. And so that upped my audience. Right. And so it was all good. So.
Wow. That's a very non-linear way to get into development.
No. I am just a spaz in every way. I'm like, oh. I mean, when I was a consultant, my criteria for taking work at that time was, is it really interesting? Is it cutting edge? Can I charge a really high rate because nobody else knows how to do it?
Right.
And like that's how I got into BI, SQL Server BI, because like I started doing data mining when Jamie McLennan showed the data mining extensions when I was up there for a training. And it was, 10 years ago. And I started doing it, because I realized right off it was data mining for the real world. And I grokked the potential. And, I went back and I went, another thing I always do I did at that time for all this new stuff when I was a trainer is I would do my first contract for the new technology, either cheap or super free for nonprofits.
Right.
Because again, I also have this helping gene. Mm-hmm. So the first data mining I ever did was for the Orange County, California Philharmonic to help them to analyze their subscriber base. And it was super simple. But you know what? They got value. They got value out of it. So that's been another thread of my consultancy is that I'm on the cutting edge of these technologies. And so nobody really knows them. Right. And I also always focus on business value because I came from the business side. So for example, I was an early adopter of SQL Server data quality services because I could see right off the bat, oh, this is easy. And I can see an analyst going in and cleaning out a list, right?
Right.
Now there's parts of the whole EIM story that are like horrible, like master data services. Good idea. Where's the product? You know what I mean? And again, it's really great being outside of Microsoft, now that I've come out after 4 years and come back to consulting. And I came back because there was, all the big data and the NoSQL. It was just too interesting and too much going on in the clouds and all that kind of stuff. And frankly, I was not happy with some of the things I would have to do in DPE, like evangelize products I didn't believe in,
right?
Like Windows Phone. So I came back out and now I get to really, tell it straight. And I'm having so much fun because in my areas, which are cloud and data, there's so much to pick from. So I can say, in this cloud, I like this and this and this for your implementation. And in that cloud, I like that, it's just fun.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show. I think hopefully our listeners will really enjoy the nonlinear nature of your story.
Well, if they stuck with me this far, they must be ADD as well.
Well, I think there's certainly a contingent there.
Yeah.
The ones that will be listening to this podcast at 2 times normal speed.
Well, one of the things I just want to, kind of close out with is really, honestly, if you hear nothing else from my story is, anybody can work in these technical careers as long as you have the sort of curiosity and the ability to work hard. And I mean, it's such an important message because I'm, really want to inspire more people. And no matter how old they are, no matter, just people. I mean, that our technology workforce does not reflect all the people that we have. And I think that's just really unfortunate because, man, it's a great career.
It really is.
Fun. I've had so much fun.
It really is. And to your point, I agree that it's more about hard work than degree or what your background is or that you started when you were a kid. Some of the best people I know in this industry are ones that were, maybe even had some unfortunate career choices early on and then found that their curiosity was met by computers in one way or another.
Yeah. And one other little thing I'll just tell you, because I just did this recently and it was fantastic. I had an injury again, this pattern, right? And I never really had enough math because, frankly, honestly, I was discouraged, which is really a drag. Sure. And I listened to it. And I took the time to fill in all the gaps in my basic math and to go from pre-algebra all the way up to calculus by using the Khan Academy. And I did it 1 to 3 hours a day. And seriously, I learned calculus like last year, and it's just wonderful. And I love the Khan Academy. I cannot tell you enough. It is not just for kids. And so many people there isn't big data, right? How do you do all these mathematical algorithms? You have to have the math. And another, sort of message I want to get out there is if you don't have it now because of the environment we have, you can just go learn it.
You can. I'm actually using Khan Academy to go through geometry, which I skipped in college as well.
Yeah. Isn't it fun?
It's amazing.
Yeah, seriously. It's like my new great thing.
Well, thanks for being on, and enjoy the California morning.
Great. Thanks again.